That Naturopathic Podcast. TNP.
Hello there.
Hi, and thanks for joining us. I'm Dr. Michelle Pobega, naturopathic doctor.
And I'm Dr. David Miller, ND, and we hear your frustrations. This show is for you.
This show is for you if you're feeling like your current healthcare strategy is not getting to the root cause or the underlying reasons for your health.
This show is for you if you've been told that you're fine, but you definitely don't feel very well.
This show is for you if you're walking out of your doctor's office with 1, 2, 3, 4, or even 5 medications without any mention of diet, lifestyle, or a long-term game plan.
This show is for you if you've got several specialists taking care of you, but no one is really putting all the pieces together.
This show is for you if you believe that health should be part of healthcare. These problems have solutions.
We know it.
Our patients know it.
And we want you to know it.
Naturopathic medicine is the solution that you should know about.
Welcome to another episode of That Naturopathic Podcast. Dr. David Miller, ND, here with Michelle Pobega. ND, what's up?
What's up, everybody?
We're back.
I don't know what I'm doing sometimes. I forget we're not on video, so people can't get the full effect of my lunacy.
Yeah. But I get it. Anyway, look, we're here to talk about, we got another like sort of herbal spotlight today. Not super long, but really, I hope, this is really maybe timely for those in the Northern Hemisphere in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
But it could be used for other reasons too, right?
Totally. But I've always viewed this as something for supporting our immune system, supporting cold and flus, supporting infections. So I think the timing of that
you use it?
I have, yeah. And like in certain formulations. In both, right?
Yeah.
So I've used it in certain immune formulas for myself, especially in the past when I was working at the Big Carrot and I was around people who are coming in sick all the time and I need to support my immune system. So like I believe Deep Immune has some Andrographis in it and astragalus, as well as some like mushrooms and stuff and Schisandra from St. Francis Herbs Farm. I think Andrographis is in there. But I've used some other formulas that have had it as well. I've used it for patients as well. I like it.
So
I think it's kind of badass, but it's mostly immune specific that I'm using it for.
Yeah, and I think that's probably generally the way I would use it too. Now that I've had another look at it, I don't get excited about supplements and herbs very often, although I am very balanced right now on my sublingual glutathione supplement. You
are very excited in that, and like you mentioned it several times in that recording.
I'm buying it by the case, like it's going here. It is wonderful, but I'm excited to. Here's the thing with Andrographis. Okay, so we've got traditional use, which is always nice, and when traditional use from multiple systems of medicine, we got TCM and Ayurveda, both generally using it for very similar things. Which I'll let you take it away a little bit more on that in a minute. But when that then also sort of superimposes on its use. Clinically in more modern evaluation from, let's say, a Western perspective, that's nice. And then there's a general, this is hard to explain and really pretty much impossible to substantiate, but there's a general feeling as a naturopath who has naturopath friends and went to school with naturopaths and stuff. There's a general feeling that Andrographis is like, it is one of the gangster shit ones, right? It's like it's got a real it's got a good what's the right word? It's got a good reputation, I would say, in those who know, like, who are in our sort of line of work. Yeah. Including Francis Ashwagandha. I think I remember him talking about it too.
For our good friend.
So when you got Francis Ashwagandha, a general consensus in the naturopathic community, multiple traditional systems of medicine, and pretty hardcore evidence showing it's very helpful in upper respiratory tract infections, including COVID. We said it. Fine. It's actually being tested a lot in its use. It's got great antiviral capacity. It's been tested HIV. Like it's a neat herb.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Take it away, Michelle.
I think if I remember correctly, in bot medicine class in school, I don't remember if it was Paul Saunders or if it was oh my god, what was our other bot med teacher? how could I forget Godfrey? I was like, why am I blanking?
Oh,
I could see his hair though, but I couldn't remember
yeah.
the name. But one of them, I believe it was Andrographis, either Andrographis or Astragalus, and they titled it the King of the Immune Herbs. And I can't remember which one of those two it was, because they're both immune, but one's immunomodulating, which is Astragalus. Andrographis is more immunostimulating. So it's not something that you just want to use all the time compared to Astragalus, which is a little bit more modulatory, like echinacea or
Yeah.
mushrooms, where it can work with the ebbs and flows, and it's not just revving the engine unilaterally. And I think of Andrographis as more one of those things where I want to rev the engine unilaterally and in a punctuated period of time. You know what I mean? That's kind of how
Ooh,
I
you
feel
know
about
what?
this.
That's a really that's pretty succinct, and that's actually, that's what I'm coming to after reading some of the info you've compiled and some studies. That's kind of where I'm at with how I'll probably apply it.
Yeah.
And probably especially when there seems to be like heat in traditional medicine, which manifests in more of our Western perspective as inflammation and fever,
Yeah.
that sort of thing, and
Yeah.
redness, like raw redness, inflammation, fever. The
Yeah.
more your picture is that, the more I'm thinking it needs to be thought about.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. So Andrographis paniculata, it's been used for centuries in like Asia, in America, as well as African continents, and it can grow quite readily in various soils, which is why it's like quite well distributed, like
In what
globally,
soils?
like different types of soils. Like it can
Right.
thrive really well. It doesn't require very, myopic type of climate or soil, or very specific. Like it's a bit more vast with how it can grow from what I was looking into. One of the things it's also known as is king of bitters, which immediately made me think of like bitter receptors all through the digestive system, liver, gallbladder, etc. So I'm wondering if there is benefit there. Now, I did come across some information about how it can maybe work as like hepatorenal protective, maybe liver enzyme modulating, maybe a little digestive support, but that doesn't seem to be where a lot of the predominant research is. So I didn't really get much into that. But if it's got a bitterness to it, then I imagine it will have a positive effect on digestive function too. Now, a lot of times, like we've learned, it's like common colds, flus, fevers, infections. Now, I did find a really cool list of things where the whole plant has been sometimes even used in certain areas of the world for like snake bites and insect bite treatment, for influenza, for dysentery, respiratory infections, and malaria, where like the leaf is good for like fever, colic pain, digestive issues like irregular stools and diarrhea, ulcers, even hepatitis, fevers, coughs and colds, bronchitis kind of stuff. Aerial parts are very much specific to the common cold, as well as maybe cancer care, and urinary tract infections, even hypertension is in that list. And then the root would be more of like a febrifuge, so working for fever specifically. And it's a stomachic and an anthelminic, so working on the digestive system and also purging microbes. So I was like, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, and from what I read too, it did seem like, we have to be careful about conflating the whole herb with one of the components of it.
Yeah.
But what's the main component of it? It's it's pronunciation of these things is really
Yeah.
difficult.
Antalabni diterpene lactones seems to be what accounts for most of its therapeutic activity, but it's not
Yeah,
just
andrographolides, maybe that's a bigger group. Like whatever. My point, what I'm trying to say here is, it seems like, at least with this herb, looking for something with a standardized amount of andrographolides, like at least 5% or whatever, seems to be important, because they seem to do a lot of the heavy lifting. Although I've read some research too saying that some of the effects of the whole herb are greater than the effects of just the andrographolides. So, I mean, it's one of those where you want to probably make sure you get a standardized dose, or standardized extract if possible.
Yeah.
So,
And if it comes down to it, like even when I was listing the whole plant versus the leaf versus the aerial part versus the root, each section alone, each part of the plant still has like a varied array of things that it can address. So it's not one particular molecule in isolation. It's the synergy of the plant based on the part you're using that will have the most predominant effects. And a lot of the studies I was looking at were like isolating a specific part of Andrographis, and then looking at that one thing and how it can work on bacteria, or that one thing and how it can work on viruses. And I feel like that's helpful to know the active components, but there's also a really beautiful synergy that happens with plant-based medicine. And it's because of how the lactones work with the flavonoids and work with the polyphenols that work with the trace minerals that work with like the caffeic acid, and like there's
the whole is greater than the sum of the parts.
That's just it. So some of the studies I found a little bit frustrating. So I was like, you're looking at like 1% of what this plant is composed of.
But it's
maybe it's because of pharmaceutical purposes they want to be able to do extractions, and I get that.
Of course, that's not meant to be cynical. That's the reality. You're not going to make any money on Andrographis. You're going to make money on a extract that may be helpful.
Extract, that
may be helpful. Or a modified, like how they took vitamin A and modify it. They're trying to do vitamin D analogs. Like that's how business works. And I'm not saying 100% good or 100% bad. That's
same with like what white willow bark for aspirin, but white willow bark doesn't have it's beautiful as a herb, but aspirin in isolation is very specific to targeted things, right? So,
and I think a lot of this research, though, Michelle, is a symptom of the fact, like the reason we're sort of having to wade through so many papers on so many different extracts of different parts and blah blah blah, is because this is a really, really heavily researched herb.
Yeah, it's actually pretty incredible the amount of research that has gone into it. Like I ended up finding a meta-analysis, and it was like had so many articles that it went through just to understand the backing for Andrographis's effects, which was pretty awesome. And the interesting thing that I found too is that there was the results of numerous toxicity evaluations of the extracts and the metabolites isolated from the plant didn't show any significant acute toxicity in any kind of experiments, which was really beautiful too. So good to know for people.
There's the traditional use. There's no hesitation even in pregnancy, but there was a study, probably like a high dose extract of one of them showing abortifacient. So like anything, we're going to be extra careful, but it looks like in traditional medicine, they don't have any issue with that. And they're probably using, not as high concentration of particular components of a herb, rather they're using the herb. I think in general, it looks like the leaf aerial parts are the most commonly used. There was no real consensus, but because what they're looking for a lot of the time are those andrographolides that I was talking about. So if you can get them from the stem or the leaf or what, they don't really care as long as you're getting a good amount of those. So that may be relevant when you're looking at what Andrographis you look for. Probably the leaf or aerial parts would probably be what I look for.
I mean, when I've used this traditionally, it's been for people with the common cold, or people who have a more difficult time getting over viral infections, or just infections in general when they get really sick. I know that there is a formula that we use in my Georgetown clinic, and my clinic owner was saying she'll often use it even with like Lyme's disease patients, and it does include Andrographis in the formulation to help with like some of the more tougher co-infections. So it can be broad in and out for different reasons. And it's not just for the common cold, but there is a lot of research for the common cold. And I want to just talk about that because it is an immunostimulant. It can stimulate your antibodies. It can stimulate non-specific immune response. So like macrophages and phagocytosis, proliferation, even of splenic lymphocytosis as well.
That's cool.
Yeah. And there was, some studies that there were some, like I saw from the meta-analysis, there was like a bunch of smaller studies that they punctuated. But Andrographis led to an increase in T cells as well as other immune cells, also improving various inflammatory markers. There's also a study that found it can increase your neutrophils and your total white blood cell count, which is a huge part of your immune system. And if you're looking at your standard lab work, you can see those numbers on standard lab work. And there's great success with reducing the severity of symptoms and improving the resolution of symptoms of a lot of uncomplicated upper respiratory tract infections like the common cold. So some of the symptoms they found a significant shift in compared to placebo with like these placebo controlled trials was like headaches, fatigue, sore throat, nasal secretions, phlegm, the frequency and intensity of coughs, sleeplessness, like body aches, all those kinds of things were significantly better than placebo. And one study even showed a 52% greater improvement in symptoms by taking Andrographis versus the placebo-controlled group, which is a really nice statistics to follow.
Yeah, I saw that. And I would say, just unsubstantiated, claims by me. there, there there's a consensus. This stuff is very helpful for immunostimulation, and it's just like you actually said it probably more eloquently and succinctly. It's when you think there's an immune boost needed, the evidence is not it's not equivocal. It's very good evidence, and you don't get that I'm thinking back some of the stuff we've looked at. They'll say, "Oh yeah, mostly it's good." Sometimes no, it's pretty much across the board. This stuff is an tonic, or not, no,
Immune stimulant.
immunostimulant.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not. I don't think it's really in dispute.
No,
Which
not
you
based
can
on, not
argue
even
for.
based.
Like, I'm a doubter. I'm a type 6 on the Enneagram. I'm always troubleshooting and doubting. I don't really have that feeling with this one.
No, it's a tried and true type of remedy when you need to rev the engine on the immune system.
What
Absolutely.
what I'm interested in is because like you said, we've sort of pigeonholed it as an immune kind of stimulant. It's probably doing other things.
100%.
I think the more your immune system needs heat clearing from a traditional perspective, the more it probably is helpful too. Because those looking at immune balances and my neutrophils and my lymphocytes and my Th1 and my Th2, it's like, wow, man, like how do you really try and balance that? It's sort of like when I have people with gut issues, I don't necessarily look at what bugs are in a SIBO test. I go, are you constipated or did you have diarrhea? Like, you sometimes go back to the bigger picture stuff, and that's where I would go with this. But I'm actually wondering, like you said, because of how bitter it is, and a lot of the adverse effects that I saw, there's not that many, but there's some. They have a lot to do with the stomach. I wonder how this actually. Again, I'm wondering about the stomach. Actually, I'll just say it right now. I think a lot of the way in which we see clinical benefits of traditional and medicines in general have to do with their effects on the stomach directly, and then ancillary to the stomach effects. But
I think intestinal tract.
I got a podcast, so I can say things, and I might be wrong, guys, but I do think this has an effect on upper GI, because you said liver is one of the key areas.
Yeah.
So liver, stomach, this upper GI is the critical piece, I think, for the way medicines work in general.
I will take it a step further, since 70% of our immune system is in the intestinal tract.
Yeah,
that is also likely having also an effect there, because bitter receptors throughout the entire GI system, right? So, and
I'll add to this is a conversation. Conversations are great. I'll add to that. Where did all the input of that 70% of the immune system in the small intestine that you talk about? Where did all the input hardware for that come from? The upper GI. So we've got an initial process in a linear system. Yep. Sorry, I love complex adaptive systems, holism. That stuff is wild, but there's some linearity here, folks. I'm gonna bore the holistic thinkers maybe, but if you don't get the first step right, if things are not transformed and processed properly in the stomach, and that goes for food, and we know that, which is why I use betaine HCl with almost every damn patient, and almost every damn one gets some improvement. If we process and transform herbs properly, I argue, then they don't work in the subsequent steps as well. Wow.
Well, that's also why, but also we have bitter taste receptors, and then with herbal medicine too, but no, on the tongue. So the thing is
yeah, and throughout the whole gut, which is surprising.
Right, but I want to say something very specific. So stop cutting me off, Dave.
Shut up, Dave.
We have bitter receptors on the tongue. And I remember listening to a botanist back in the day, and he was like, you can use a herbal medicine, but your body starts to get a muscle memory. And when it starts to get the taste, it starts to send signals already through your system before it even gets absorbed, because the bitterness tastes on your tongue. So that's also where I would argue to use things like tinctures. And yes, my clients complain and they come back, this tastes like dirty mud water, or it's worse than Jägermeister, which most of them are, or it's like this weird sludge. I'm kind of like, tough love, but we're going to keep doing it because you're getting additional benefits. Your body's now starting to learn what to do. And then there was
the key.
And the thing is this botanist was saying that eventually, sometimes you only have to take a small amount to start to send the effect through the body, because now the body's bitter receptors already have this memory of what to do with that taste, and it starts to send the signals out through that, which I haven't looked into further, but he was very adamant about this as a botanist. And I was like, well, that's pretty cool. If you don't have to use as much at like the second time around, or the third time you have to like stimulate your system, like with a subsequent infection or something like that. Once it understands what to do with that message, it's more proficient. So
Yeah,
and I thought that was interesting.
The mouth and taste prepare things for the stomach.
And that's just
like
right?
Your stomach will prepare the oven according to what it's cooking, and taste will help your stomach. That's why, in Chinese medicine, the mouth is the opening to the stomach, right? So,
Yeah.
so that's interesting. I think what you said, the key part from my biased perspective, was when you said it's like a bonus. Like I have like a ginger and gentian capsule by Wise Woman Herbals for people who just can't do the taste. So, because like I was saying, there are bitter receptors throughout the digestive tract. It's crazy. I remember learning about that and going, that seems weird, but there are. I just think it's better if you get it, if you have to taste it, it's doing something that's better. It's not like it's useless, but it's probably better if you have to taste a crappy taste.
I think it takes the effects up a notch, turns the volume up a little bit on the effectiveness of that medicine, and maybe the quickening of the speed of that medicine as well. So anyways, I just a little something about that. But when I was looking into this too, it's not just that Andrographis stimulates the immune system. It also has some very specific antimicrobial properties. So lab studies have shown that is effective against various parasites. Hello, the love of my lives. Well, not really. Yes and no. So things like giant roundworms, and even things like malaria, it's been very helpful for. But there are some antimicrobial or antibacterial properties, like it's been effective against E. coli, Pseudomonas aeruginosa, Staphylococcus aureus, Streptococcus pyogenes. It has some antifungal effects against Candida. But then the interesting stuff is when it starts to come to the viral research. It can, and it has been found to target viral replication. It has been found to target the transcription of viruses within our cellular structure. It has been shown to have a host cell recognition as well. So this is where I think in the last several years, it's piqued interest for COVID, as you were mentioning, and you found a ton of studies that further looked into this, which is just to further support the validity behind its antiviral effects.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, and it's also amazing that you're allowed to publish anything like that now, which is
Well, I mean, after the fact, sure.
Yeah, but it's there someone I know has COVID. It's like it's going to be there, so it might not be a bad thing to know about too. I saw there was a study here, significant effect on C-reactive protein and interleukin-6, which makes sense because interleukin-6 is what's related to C-reactive protein after 14 days treatment. Additionally, improvement in D-dimer, which I believe they look at as one of the
clotting factor with with a lot of the
and ESR. So these ESR and CRP are my two sort of negotiable inflammatory markers that I look at in all my new patients. So again, a sort of like Western correlate in terms of like whatever clinical sciences, CRP and ESR reflecting heat in Chinese medicine and heat in I don't know the correlate for Ayurveda, but basically like heat and sort of fever and inflammation.
I don't know what dosha that one is. I don't know.
I'm not even going to pretend to know it.
No.
But TCM Francis is what we learned. Yeah, of course, Francis Ashwagandha. Did we talk about anyone more than Francis?
God, I hope he listens to this podcast one day and hears the shout outs we give him.
I hope he still works at the.
He's not there anymore. No, he's not there anymore. He left before I left. So he went to go live in a totally different country and live off the land, which, and nowadays, back then I thought was crazy, but now I'm kind of like, I get you. Yeah.
Okay. So what do you, so antiviral, antimicrobial, immune stimulant, it looked like it had humoral and innate immune benefits. And what else did I see here? I looked at Pizzorno and Murray's textbook of natural medicine just to see what Pizzorno and Murray said about it, and they said it has tremendous effectiveness in inhibiting common bacterial infections. Then they call it almost a herbal antibiotic. That's That's pretty high praise, I would say.
I feel like that's a pretty sound praise. Yeah.
Hmm.
To me, take it away.
Take it away.
So
This is
there
your
was
baby.
well, it was my suggestion, but it
Yeah.
belongs to Mother Nature. It's not my baby. So there's also a little bit of stuff around arthritic support with rheumatoid arthritis, that they would show a decrease in swelling and some tenderness in the joints. Although I did come across some articles that were saying it doesn't necessarily affect the pain per se. And then other things were saying it did reduce pain, but specifically in osteoarthritis, but tenderness and rheumatoid arthritis. But I think what it does, it really reduces like the swelling, the stiffness, and like the fatigue that might happen with chronic inflammation in a joint. So that was pretty interesting. And like you were touching on earlier today, how it can reduce inflammatory mediators like interleukin 6, as well as TNF alpha. And it also suppress some key signaling pathways of inflammatory cytokines as well. And that's where some of its anti-inflammatory effects are going to come in. And as we know, when your body has to fight an infection, or if your immune system comes into having to like charge in to take care of something, inflammation is just a natural byproduct of your immune system's activity. So to have some anti-inflammatory effects as well as an immunostimulating effects is a nice package when it comes to how this supports your body in those moments, rather than
It's
being
hard.
very just like linear about what it does and only having one avenue of what it does. It kind of does
Yeah,
both.
because that's important. I was just thinking about what you're talking about there, like how you do want some inflammation, when you're fighting something, but you don't want too much. It's kind of like fever, like you probably want some, but you don't want to be like boiling your brain.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to come back to the same thing. I hope it hammers home, is that the more there's a heat picture, I think the more this stuff really presents itself as a real viable option, either as a patient or as a clinician. And I was just going to ask you, just on the spot, because the arthritis info that you showed there, what kind of arthritis would you think you'd be using it for, if you could pick, like, because there's different kinds of arthritis, right? There's like fibromyalgia type muscular pain, and then there's like juvenile arthritis, autoimmunity, and then there's, so what are you thinking? Like I was wondering what kind of arthritis or joint issues you might be thinking it fits for.
I would probably take it a step more broad, because it's not something that I would want to stimulate the immune system too long. I would probably use it more succinctly if there was a low-grade infection or microbial issues that
Yes.
was contributing to the inflammation. I would be
Yes.
using it in those moments, but I wouldn't just be using it long-term for joint pain. Like I wouldn't be using it like I use turmeric for joint pain or boswellia for joint pain, right? So I think it would be more specific to the preliminary activity as to what finding the root cause of the inflammation. And if there's some kind of stealth pathogen or microbial burden, then I needed the immune system to be in charge, then I would work with it in that moment. But I wouldn't use it long-term for joint pain.
Neat. That's exactly what I was thinking, especially if we had any sort of inclination that there was a lipopolysaccharide or infection related arthritis
Right.
that's hot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also because of autoimmune conditions, and a lot of like these arthritic types of things are autoimmune, we want to be careful with immunostimulation. Although I think there's some stuff to show that this might be okay in autoimmune conditions, but I can't say unequivocally. So don't quote me on that, guys. But I think that's also where you want to proceed with caution with autoimmune conditions. You don't want to rev the engine too far in one direction or the other. So that's where I typically stick to like immunomodulatory things too.
And you did exactly what I was hoping you would do, and either we're both wrong or it's cool. What I was thinking is I would probably use it pulsed. If I was going to do it, I would do pulsed dosing, probably, like, hit someone hard with it for a bit and just sort of see what it, did it jog things the right way or did it jog things in a bad way? And unfortunately, that's what you have to do in clinical practice sometimes.
Yeah, it would definitely be more like punctuated moments of using it
Yes.
rather than just, for sure. The last thing that I seemed to find some interesting insights on is its ability with cancer, which is super cool. So my studies have shown its great ability to reduce tumor size and cancer metastasis alongside chemotherapy. So versus just chemo alone. When we paired the two together, the effects of chemo was enhanced, but also there was greater immune health benefits in addition to that. So then you leave the body with a little bit more vitality and strength through those chemotherapy treatments. According to this, it was a mouse study, so I can't say unequivocally it'll be the same way through humans. So please work with someone who knows what they're doing to help you navigate those waters. Please don't take this upon yourself. But it seems to have an effect on like a good array of different types of cancers. So there was like colorectal cancer, skin cancers, certain breast cancers, lung tumors, lung cancers. Like it kind of had a good gamut of different types of, and I think I even read somewhere leukemia. So it's not just specific to one type of cancer, tumor, metastasis, but there was a study that noted that it can enhance also cytotoxicity against cancer cells, and thereby directly inhibit cancer cell growth, which is really great.
Yeah, if it shapes up your Th1 sort of precision,
Yeah.
which, you know, would account for a lot of the antiviral and then perhaps some of the anti-cancer or cancer supportive or whatever the right terminology is. Yeah, it's a wild herb.
Yeah.
For now,
awesome.
my comfort level will be definitely upper respiratory tract infections and immunostimulant when needed, and perhaps pulsed efforts in some forms of arthritis where I suspect some microbial burden.
Yeah, I think for me, it'll still be the same. It'll still be, you know, cold and flu support, infection, but also like those tough infections, infection support. And like I said, I've given it for some people where we feel like they need an extra push and we're doing the antimicrobials, but their immune system needs to be like reinvigorated because, you know, their garbage that they're carrying is quite pervasive. So this would come into play for those types of moments as well.
Cool. Well, now I have to go look for where to get Andrographis. I know AOR has it, but I'll be looking.
Yeah,
to
in
see where
capsule
else we can
form,
get
but
it.
maybe you're going to want to get it in a tincture so you can get those beta receptors stimulated, sir.
Yeah, you know what? I'm just gonna be straight up here. It's rare that I use tinctures, because most people are wimps about taste, and that's just the truth. At least the people
I get it. But I have various formulations that I use for like parasitic stuff and I have to oscillate them, and I will challenge my clients to just
I
get it.
think
And
it's
I'm like,
better.
and I'll just be like, I'm sorry how this tastes. Just pretend you're doing shots of Jaeger every morning and every night. Just like party. It's party, guys. So it sucks, but that's part of
It'll be
that's
better.
part of bot med. That's part of bot med is the taste, the smell, you know, the synergy of how things are working together. So I challenge my clients to do that, but then I don't use it for everything, but there are very specific things that I use in tincture form.
Yeah, I'll have the tincture for the people who are really sick or really motivated. Yeah, that's the truth. Yeah, because the average Joe.
Oh yeah, I get a lot of pushback on those tinctures. They come back and they're like, "What was that?" I was like, "Guess what? You get to do another bottle." They're like, "God, Dr. Pobega," and I was like,
but they are better. Like I agree with you. They're better, and if needed, do them. But I think it'll still be good in capsule or tableted form.
Yeah, it'll still have amazing effect. That's not to undermine the capsule forms, for sure. I have some that have it Andrographis in the formulations and capsule forms with, you know, a bunch of other herbs and synergy too. So it's not without its value that way either. 100%.
So anything else for the king of bitters?
I don't think so. I think that was pretty good. It was a nice refresher on this too. I kind of like these moments where it kind of reinvigorates my appreciation of what we do and the tools that we have. Yeah.
No, I think that was some good learnings for me too. Okay. All right. We'll talk to you next week.
See ya.